Welcome to Opal STV. Today I'm in Gibraltar at the Gibraltar Stock Exchange. Gibraltar Stock Exchange is actually Europe's newest stock exchange, and they're doing some amazing things for the global alternative investment industry, for finance and for the insurance sector. I have with me today Nick Cowan, he's the managing director, and Philip Young, who is the marketing director. But we'll start with Nick. Nick, please give us a background. What's the Gibraltar Stock Exchange, and tell us also more about Gibraltar in general.
GSX, we opened at the very end of 2014. We were originally given our license to technically list open-ended funds, with Gibraltar's mantra being reputation, regulation, and speed to market. So we wanted to make sure we complemented those three themes of the jurisdiction. So we wanted to try and provide a really sort of competitive listing solution for open-ended funds to get visibility and connectivity in the EU and provide the gateway to the member nations across the European Union. So after the first year, we signed up a dozen member firms, and then we began our extension to increase our license, which is primarily what we're here to talk about today. And as of Monday last week, early January, we've been licensed to move into the field of debt securities and closed-end funds. So under the banner of closed-end funds, we now can look after all of the collective investment schemes that are looking to list on an EU-regulated exchange. But under debt securities, we can now expand into bonds, derivative securities, and most importantly, I think asset-backed securities, where we see a particular area of growth to provide financing solutions to really three distinct audiences. One is fund managers looking for European gateway solutions. One is the smaller corporates, the SMEs, looking for a mini bond solution where they can access investors across the EU. And finally, the reinsurance sector, where we believe utilising securitization can provide interesting solutions, particularly for the ILS and cat bond market, which we think are particularly exciting.
Nick, that's very interesting. Now please tell us also more about Gibraltar itself, the jurisdiction and the place.
The most important fact about Gibraltar to state is that it's in the EU. And in fact, it's the only British territory that is actually in the European Union. So it's English language, it's English law, and it's sterling, but it's part of the EU. And that's enabled Gibraltar to build a very strong financial services industry over the last 15 to 20 years. So in terms of e-gaming, a lot of the names that you would recognize are based in Gibraltar. Insurance, there's about 60 insurance companies here. The fund business itself is very strong here. And financial services, shipping, tourism, these are all fundamental sectors that's enabled Gibraltar to grow at a GDP growth rate of around 10% per annum for the last 10 to 15 years. It has a population of 32,000, about 10,000 cross the frontier every day from mainland Spain. We're joined to mainland Spain into Gibraltar. And it's one of the highest GDP per capita jurisdictions globally. And it's a self-financing, self-governing parliamentary democracy. So it's a very, very prosperous and well-regulated jurisdiction.
So Nick, how would you describe your competitive advantages? How would you say GSX is different from the other exchanges out there?
I think firstly, to understand GSX's offering, we need to come back to what the jurisdiction is trying to achieve. And I think what Gibraltar is very ambitious. Matthias, you've visited us now many times. We are 3 miles long and 2/3 of a mile wide. So there's only so much growth in the jurisdiction that we can actually achieve through other sectors. So financial services is a core part of what Gibraltar is trying to do here. So in terms of GSX and where we fit in our competitive offering, we wanted to make sure that in a robust regulatory environment, we provide low-cost, fast-to-market solutions for issuers. And that's really what we've tried to lay out in terms of our stall. So if you look at our actual securities that we're starting to roll out with regards to debt securities and closed-end funds, there are several aspects to understand. The first part is being in the EU requires you to comply with all the directives that are in the EU. Now that has advantages as well as disadvantages. The advantage is, in order to list on GSX, an EU-regulated exchange, you have to have a prospectus that is approved by the competent authority. In our case, that's the Financial Services Commission, our regulator. Once your prospectus is approved and you list on GSX, That comes with several benefits and rights. The primary one is that you have a passport. You can now passport across the 31 nations within the EEA. Your prospectus is now eligible to basically be marketed across the entire EEA, and that's incredibly powerful. So what we wanted to try and do and to make sure that we achieve is to provide a package that was competitive but also fast to market. So if you think about the pricing service, the prospectus approval process requires the regulator to be in partnership and on the same page as the stock exchange. So we worked very closely with the regulator over the last 6 months in making sure that that prospectus approval process is efficient. So if you look at other jurisdictions, that approval process and that pricing can be quite high. The price of Gibraltar to have your prospectus approved by the regulator is the best part of £1,000. That's incredibly competitive. And our speed in terms of approval process, we offer guaranteed turnaround times. So it comes back, Matthias, to what we were saying in the initial opening. For the medium and smaller sized entity, whether you're a fund manager or whether you're an issuer, whether you're a corporate, we think that GSX's competitive offering in terms of speed, but particularly pricing, means that we have an offering that is really attractive and relevant to the smaller entity. And that's our unique offering. We don't lay out our stall that we will be a direct competitor to the incredibly large and successful exchanges. What we do is we provide an alternative for that smaller entity to get access to the European market using GSX as an EU gateway, and that's incredibly powerful and valuable.
So I have now a couple of questions for Phil Young, who is the marketing director of the Gibraltar Stock Exchange. So I know that the Gibraltar Stock Exchange has launched a couple of really interesting and fascinating products. Please tell us more about those new products you have launched.
Well, the launch of our new products has really derived from the result of our marketing campaign that GSX has been involved with over the last 3 years, where myself and my other colleagues have been traveling the world, particularly the finance hubs of Asia and North America, to talk with those small to medium-sized entities that are really looking at how best can we tap and get access to the European Union. And that's where we as GSX have come up with a number of solutions, and with the application of our new products, particularly the debt securities, can offer a number of solutions to a wide variety of small to medium-sized entities that now I'd like to talk about via a number of case studies. Now, the first case study involves typically a non-EU fund manager that's looking at how to access European investors. Now, currently, as we know, that the regulatory complexity and barrier to entry and cost of coming to the European Union for a fund manager, particularly small to medium-sized entities, means that they're doing one or two things, Matthias. They're either ignoring the European Union entirely because of that cost. They haven't got the bandwidth to be able to figure out a way to come to Europe, or they're relying on reverse solicitation. Now, in our view, that is both of those business models are not sustainable, and they have to look at more practical ways to look at the European Union, because in our opinion, with 25% of the global wealth within the European Union, it's simply too big a market to ignore. Now, what we believe with the launch of our new products is that we have a solution for those fund managers, and the solution is this: that if using one of our GSX member firm platforms, that they securitize their fund and issue asset-backed securities that list on GSX with an approved prospectus, that these securities that we or our member firms often refer to as exchange-traded instruments, ETIs, that these offer full passporting and promotional rights throughout the European Union. And also, they're eligible for UCITS funds investors. So the use of these ETIs are, for example, for an Asian manager with a Cayman fund to look at testing his marketing strategy to European investors. And then if he is successful with that marketing strategy and he can gauge investor appetite, then he can come and look at coming on shore with more certainty and more confidence. We're also incredibly interested and excited about the bond market and using GSX as a platform for small to medium-sized companies who are finding the traditional banking sector within the European Union still tight, with an alternative way to tap the capital markets and to raise alternative finance. They can do that by a number of ways, for example, by the issuing of standard mini bonds of, say, typically 5, 10, 20, 30 million euros. These can be listed on GSX with full passporting rights throughout the European Union plus UCITS eligibility. The companies can also perhaps consider securitization vehicles using our member firm platforms for perhaps even a cheaper and faster to market application of mini bonds also. Now, our final example is how GSX can assist the reinsurance market. Now, reinsurance companies that can structure catastrophe bonds, collateralized reinsurance vehicles and other insurance-linked securities to take risk off their balance sheet can now consider looking within the EU to structure such vehicles. Now, insurers and reinsurers can set up securitization structures within Gibraltar. They can securitize their risk, issue debt securities, list on GSX to provide EU passporting, direct promotion rights, and, again, UCITS eligibility.
So I wanted to wrap up today's video with talking about the listing process on GSX. So step one is you need to appoint your member firm. So if it's a debt security, you need to appoint a Class 2 member firm. If it's a closed-end fund, you need to appoint a Class 1 member firm. Let's talk about debt securities. So stage one is appoint your member firm. The member firm will prepare the prospectus for you. We have created a prospectus handbook. We've created two, one for closed-end funds and one for debt securities. But for debt securities, the member firm will prepare the handbook, prepare the prospectus with you, then enter the listing process. The member submits all the documentation to GSX, and GSX carries out an initial review of the prospectus and the listing bundle. That takes 5 days, or up to 5 days for our initial response. Once the member firm and the issuer have completed their comments, we have a further 3 days, after which we go to the regulator, the Financial Services Commission, and they have 5 days in which to finalise and approve the prospectus. Listing on GSX means that you can nominate the Financial Services Commission as your competent authority under the following conditions. If you're an EU issuer, meaning you're a company or issuer domiciled in the EU, as long as your denomination is above €1,000, you can choose the regulator where you're listing on that regulated market. So in the case of GSX, if your denomination is higher than €1,000, you can choose the FSC. If you're outside the EU, otherwise known as a third country issuer, as long as you're listing on GSX, the FSC is automatically your competent authority. And that's really important because if you can nominate the FSC as your competent authority, we'll process your prospectus for a £1,000 fee, and that's really important. And we'll do that within the time frame I alluded to earlier. The prospectus is approved by the FSC, assuming you comply with our listing rules. Your prospectus is published, you're listed on GSX, and effectively that's the process completed. And as Phil was mentioning earlier, if it's a debt security with an approved prospectus, you achieve all of those passporting rights across the 31 EEA nations. That is, we believe, an incredibly exciting gateway to the EU. And that's the role that GSX wants to play. So, as Phil mentioned earlier, just to wrap it up, we think there are a number of financing solutions which you can utilise debt securities in order to provide. Whether you're a fund manager looking for access solutions, whether you're an SME looking for capital to raise and diversify your funding, or whether perhaps you're a reinsurance company looking to move risk off your balance sheet quickly. These are just some of the examples today where we believe debt securities can play an important role. And GSX is incredibly excited about 2016 and the introduction of our new securities. Thank you very much.